I like that one by Charles Allen. When you say a situation or a person is hopeless, you're slamming the door in the face of God. Absolutely great quote. Some people might think, as soon as you think it's hopeless, it is. What do you think? If you think it's hopeless, sometimes what we think is true. Sometimes what we think is true. It may be true to us. Maybe we don't see a way. It says God makes a way in the desert. Or I like this one, this next quote. Discouragement is the anesthetic the devil uses on a person just before he reaches in and carves out his heart. Discouragement. We all feel it. We all deal with it. It's at that point where we're at sometimes a road that has a fork in the road, and there's a decision to be made. And if we go the way of hopelessness and discouragement, we'll always go probably the same old bad path. And there's really no hope down that road. It has an effect in American businesses. American businesses lose approximately $153 billion annually because of employees struggling with chronic health conditions, and billions more due to, quote, mild illnesses and family emergencies. But they found what helps employees show up to work more often is hope. In other words, employees are excited. If they're excited about the company's goals and their own personal future, they'll miss less work. They've done this correlation and conducted a study, and they found that hope is one of the key elements. People miss work less if they have hope. Because there's a reason to get up. There's a reason to go forward. The suicide rate has gone up way high. From 1999 to 2010, the suicide rate among American ages 35 to 64 rose by nearly 30%. More Americans now die of suicide than car accidents. The pronounced increase was seen among men in their 50s, a group in which suicides jumped by nearly 50%. The suicide rate for middle-aged men was 3 times higher than middle-aged women. And this is what they said it has a lot to do with. The root causes have to do with failed expectations and a loss of hope. Julie Phillips, researcher from Rutgers, said, the boomers had great expectations for what their life would look like, but it hasn't turned out that way. And then Dr. Phillips warns that future generations will be facing the same conditions that lead to this sense of despair. Most parents want their children to have a better life than they did. But they have different statistics out that said, and quote, what is the better life? A better life probably means a better job and more money. Guess what? They are saying that for the majority of younger people that come into the workplace, they're not going to make as much as their parents in this next generation. I heard that on the radio this past week. What does that have to do? What expectations? We expect certain things. Hope. You don't drown by falling in the water, you drown by staying there. We all fall. We all have bad experiences. We all have times where things don't go right. What do we do after we get knocked down? Just get a little deeper in there, wallow in it a little bit, stay in that spot. What do we do? That's the difference between failing and living a life of failure. That is the difference. As I heard some years ago, a winner just gets up one more time and he gets knocked down. It was for the Chicago Bears. It was Michael Singletary. He was a linebacker. He's no longer playing. This was many years ago where Chicago had an absolutely wonderful defense. And they really are getting into the film stuff, and they film the players individually, how they do. And it says Michael Singletary, normally, because he was not as a big guy as many of the football players normally would be in that position. So what would happen with Michael Singletary, they found that the majority of the time, on the first hit, Michael Singletary would get down. But then he would get up and make the play. Life is what happens after we get up. That's when life begins. Life begins after we get up. It's not preventing us from falling down. And he became inducted into the Football Hall of Fame because of what he did after he gets knocked down. Because that's when he made the tackles. That's when he made the plays. Wow. We looked at this passage last week. David had a particular situation where he was at a very low point in his life. In 1 Samuel 30, David was greatly distressed. How many of you have been greatly distressed? Greatly distressed, not just mildly down. Can you look back at a time? If you have not been greatly distressed yet in your life, just wait. It's going to happen. It's how we respond. It's what happens in us, not what to us, that counts. David was greatly distressed. The men spoke of stoning him. And remember the situation back there is that the men, I'm not sure if it was the Amalekites or whoever it was, came in and they took the women and children and all the provisions when they came back to camp. And it was a horrible situation. They didn't know if their wives were killed or what happened to everything that went on there. The men spoke of stoning David because the souls of them all were bitterly grieved. Not only was David upset, everybody was upset with David. Have you been greatly distressed and everybody's not liking you at this point? How does it feel now? It's not only inside you're not feeling good, but outside. You're not getting affirmation, and David's the leader, and they're thinking of killing him. Not just getting a new leader, killing him. That David encouraged and strengthened himself in the Lord. The assignment this last week is that how do you encourage and strengthen yourself? What gives you real courage? What gives you real hope? How do you personally do that? When inside the emotions are going weird? What do you do with emotions that go south? Negative emotions? What do you do with that? What do you do when all of a sudden you're not the beloved king? And all of a sudden people are not really liking you at all? How do you get out of that? How do you encourage yourself? How do you get above this? How do you get out of the water? Friend, if you don't have a way to get out of this, you're going to sink.
That's right.
What are you going to do? I know what sometimes people do when they're down. They don't necessarily get out, they blame other people. They don't get out. They blame other people, or they compare themselves with others and say, oh, they got it worse than I. You're still drowning. You're not getting out. Or sometimes you say, I'm running. How about that? We just run. Or we hide. I mean, there are all sorts of situations that we can do, but in the end, unless you are encouraged, you have no vision, you're going nowhere, and you're going down. You may flail around for a while. What do? I want you to break into small groups. I want you to talk about how do you handle that situation? How do you handle when you're down? What do you do? Obviously, if you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to talk about it, but I assume everybody's here because you want to learn. It's good to get this stuff out.